You remember when marketing was fun? When you had time to be creative and connect with your customers? With HubSpot, marketing can be fun again. Turn one piece of content into everything you need, know which prospects are ready to buy, and see all your campaign results in one place. Plus, it's easy to use, helping HubSpot customers double their leads in just 12 months, which means you have more time to, enjoy marketing again. Visit HubSpot.com to get started for free. Good morning, everybody. Today is Wednesday, February 26th. I'm John Weigell here with Sara Friedman, and this is the Hustle Daily Show. Biohacking is making headlines as startup The Los Angeles Project aims to genetically modify pets to make them more interesting and complex, a few words. This includes creating rabbits that glow or, making literal unicorns. So how are they doing this? And is there a market for a shiny pet out there? We'll get into all that, but before we do, let's give it the news in business and tech. Starting out today, last week we talked about Nike partnering with Kim Kardashian's Skims, and it seems that's already made a bit of an impact. Nike stock went up 5% since investment banking firm Jefferies gave the company rave reviews this week, including a forecasted eventual rebound. From there, we go to DoorDash. DoorDash just lost $16.75 million to settle a big-time case against New York officials about tipping practices for its Dashers. The case accused DoorDash of using customer tips to offset what it would pay its Dashers. Dicey. And to pivot to a business that's gaining money is Anthropic. The AI company and Claude creator closed in on a $3.5 billion funding round. That's a lot of change. This funding will just about triple Anthropic's valuation to $61.5 billion. Sara, what do you make of this insane amount that I just said?
Yeah, these figures are getting really crazy. We know Amazon alone already invested $8 billion in Anthropic. And obviously, it's not the only AI startup that's been getting these kind of record-breaking investments. 2024 was obviously the year of artificial intelligence, and AI startups raised, I think it's $110 billion, which is 62% more than the year prior. Wow. That's according to data from the analytics firm Dealroom. So that's in contrast to the broader tech startup space, where privately backed startups raised $227 billion in 2024, and that was down 12% from 2023. So just to put it in perspective, AI is on a whole different playing field here. Yeah. These figures are absolutely mind-boggling, and the rest of the startup space is not having the same experience.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen some drops from other companies like Palantir recently, and something like this with people getting so excited about Claude and so excited about Anthropic is interesting, and it's definitely a well-performing startup. I also figured out before this podcast, I did some Anthropic research and found out through TechCrunch that Anthropic actually uses Pokemon to educate its AI. In some cases, it makes it play through the first Pokemon game, apparently. So that's pretty cool. Little tidbit.
Fascinating. Yeah, the parents have to take note.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe let your kids play Pokemon.
Start them early.
Yeah.
From there, we go on to Tesla. Tesla began rolling out a software update in China that'll give customers access to full self-driving capabilities. The update will allow vehicles to navigate exit ramps and intersections, reorganize traffic signals, change lanes and speeds, and make turns. The problem is, though, that Chinese EV maker BYD already offers this. And finally, Purina is hiring for a very important leadership position called Chief Snuggle Officer. You are unfortunately out of the running if you're a human and listening, because the pet care brand will be choosing a dog for the gig, which pays about $25,000. Not bad for a furry friend. On to the main story. Speaking of pets, and speaking of Pokemon, if you ever caught a shiny Pokemon before, the Los Angeles Project is a company that's trying to bring that same feeling to the real world by genetically modifying pets. So Sara, can you first tell me a bit about the Los Angeles Project, and also why is the name so vague? It's very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's actually a reference to the Manhattan Project, which created the atomic bomb. So They're insinuating they're up to something big over there, I think.
A new revolution,
idea.
I guess. Sure.
Yes. But it is a startup using CRISPR gene editing tech to make our pets a little bit more interesting. And for them, that means glow-in-the-dark bunnies, hypoallergenic cats and dogs, and one day possibly, as we said, literal unicorns.
Wow.
Its co-founder, Josie Zahner, is a pretty well-known biohacker. She has done things like live streaming herself being injected with the CRISPR gene editing tech. She's given herself a DIY COVID vaccine and a DIY fecal transplant. So this is someone who has a pretty experimental past, just to put it in context.
Seems like
and
it.
Zahner told Wired that the startup is about making pets, quote, more complex and interesting and beautiful and unique. And they have already begun working in stealth with a small team of 5 people.
Fascinating. I would like to give her credit for walking the walk and talking the talk, as she has clearly had some experimentation done on herself before starting in on smaller fish and smaller animals, I guess. So they're leaning in to start experimenting on animals. I know that's kind of a dicey world. I don't really know much about the regulations there, but it seems like they're starting with embryos here and kind of working from there on and just applying some new genetics to them, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they're experimenting with embryos from rabbits, hamsters, fish, frogs, and using CRISPR to delete and or insert genes to change what these animals could become once these embryos are implanted. They're pretty adamant that they're not hurting any animals, or at least I believe they said they're not killing any animals. So you can do with that what you will.
Mm-hmm.
They're also testing restriction enzyme mediated integration, which is a technique for introducing new DNA to embryos. And they've already added a gene to rabbit embryos to make them produce GFP, which is a fluorescent protein. So if those embryos are successfully transferred into a female rabbit, there could be a litter of literally glowing little bunnies born.
Wow.
In about, I think it takes 30 days for a bunny to be born. And then after that, they have their sights set on something that honestly is pretty exciting as someone who's allergic to cats, which would be tweaking an embryo of a cat so it doesn't have the FEL-D1 protein, which is what causes, I think, almost all cat allergies.
Wow.
And that would ultimately make a hypoallergenic pet.
Wow. I mean, sounds like some of these, including that one, are pretty helpful. I don't know about the glowing rabbits, if that's super helpful, but it is certainly interesting, I guess, as long as it doesn't hurt anything. But I guess all of this conversation around this, and this is kind of a new age way of doing it, but it's not new, right? There's definitely been experiments like this before, and people have tried something like this. So what did you find in your research?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like breeding animals for certain outcomes, that goes back thousands of years. Like if you wanted a ox to be sturdier, you're breeding them with the other strongest ox on the farm. Like that idea isn't new, that we would tweak animal species kind of for human benefit. And there have been other companies that have genetically modified animals. There was one called Glowfish, and they used that same GFP protein to make glowing fish, which are already sold in pet stores across the US. It ended up being a little bit of a cautionary tale. Yorktown Technologies, which developed the fish, sold the company for $50 million in 2017. But some of those glowing fish have escaped from farms in Brazil and are reproducing pretty rapidly in creeks in the Atlantic forest.
Wow.
Which people are worried could threaten native species. So we've talked about a lot of interesting stories kind of having to do with startups essentially playing God. Anytime we're in that department, there's probably something to worry about. And that's just kind of one of the many things here to think about, is what this would mean for existing species.
Yeah, there's a bit of an ethical question here when it comes to changing the genome or the gene makeup of a certain species and having that animal escape and then have an entire new sect of a certain animal. Like, what's that going to do to the environment? What's that going to do to the food chain, the population of that animal? So a lot of questions come rolling, but I guess maybe the biggest one that I have is, are they going to start selling these pets? And when do you think that's going to happen?
Yeah, the idea here, this is for commercial purposes, which in its own right is a concern. That was kind of an early concern with scientists when CRISPR tech came out, was like, how are we using this and are we using it inappropriately? So I think with a commercial application, it more so kind of begs that question, because a lot of this is technically just for fun. We don't need glow in the dark rabbits, or as nice it would be, we don't need cats that don't make us sneeze. And yeah, they are already talking about kind of more out of pocket dragons and unicorns. And then we get into really creating new species. I think as far as the bunnies, we're not far off. That has happened before, as we spoke about, and will happen quickly. I think, things like tweaking allergens will come next. I think unicorns were quite a ways off, but
yeah,
it will be something that we kind of have to decide at each step in the road what is ethical. And if people are buying these pets, I guess will also dictate how the startup moves forward.
Yeah, this also makes me think that Disney really jumped the gun when they green-lighted How to Train Your Dragon live action. So they could have waited a few years, and who knows, they could have maybe had a real live dragon. So it's their loss, honestly.
It's true. I mean, for all we know, Disney is already on this, already investing.
They're there.
Who's to say?
All right, that's going to do it for us today. Thanks for tuning into the Hustle Daily Show. We're a proud part of the HubSpot Podcast Network. Our editor is Robert Hartwig. Our executive producer is Darren Clark. We've got a ton more tech and business coverage in our newsletter. Go sign up at thehustle.co/email and follow us on Instagram at thehustledaily. We will see you tomorrow.